Hey AB Econ, this video is to review this worksheet on Ravenland where we will apply the MPC, the MPS, the multiplier to figure out how much fiscal policy, spending or taxing the government should apply. Okay, this one should be relatively quick. Okay, so first off in Ravenland, if there's what this is saying here, first thing we always have to do is interpret what's actually being said. Okay, so we know to set this up with our price level and our real GDP. Okay, and it can maintain a GDP of $200 billion. That's another way of saying that our long run aggregate supply is at $200 billion. Okay, however, the country currently has a recessionary gap of 50, let's just say that that's billion to keep things a little bit better. Okay, so that would mean that our current GDP is $150 billion, even though our long run GDP is 200. So we have a $50 billion recessionary gap. Okay, so right now, here's our short run aggregate supply. Right now, here's our aggregate demand. And that the way that I set that up, there is our whole, fundamental purpose behind fiscal policy is that we basically have to compute how much spending or how much of a tax cut would it take to get the GDP back up to equilibrium. Hopefully, if you're following the news, you know that this is kind of sort of exactly what's happening right now. And I think that the amount that they're spending is about, I think, 2 trillion. Okay. Anyway, having said that, moving right along. Okay, so the government is going to spend money for the shortage. They've done their research, and here are the figures that we need. Okay, their marginal propensity to consume is 0.8. And this we gave you here, we should be ready to figure it out anyway, that means that our marginal propensity to save is 0.2. Okay, this time they gave us both, but in an AP question, you need to be ready for them to give you either one of those and to take it from there. Okay, so from there, what we do is we figure out our spending multiplier. Our spending multiplier, 1 over 0.2, which equals 5. Okay, and then that's what we have to apply now in order to, close this gap between where we are now and our long run equilibrium. So we have a $50 billion recessionary gap. So our multiplier is 5 times how much spending to make that up. So obviously our answer here is they have to spend $10 billion. Okay, they spend $10 billion, it gets multiplied by 5, and that makes up the $50 billion recessionary gap. Okay, if there's any questions, make sure you take the opportunity to ask in, I don't know if it's called chat or class time, whatever it is tomorrow, or hit me up with an email. Okay, all right, so I just kind of did the problem, but if I was going to, I just kind of did all this stuff apparently. So our MPS is 0.2, our MPC, goodness gracious, this worksheet's really easy, and our multiplier was 5. Okay. Okay, how much would the government have to spend? And we got that answer was $10 billion. Okay, now we're going to move right along, and now in this case, they decided that they would be better off taxing. Okay, first thing that we always have to know, this is a good time to review that our taxing multiplier is always 1 less than our spending and negative. Okay, so our spending multiplier was 5. Which means that our taxing multiplier is -4. Okay, we have the same $50 billion recessionary gap. Okay, so now our multiplier is 4, and what will we have? How much taxes would we have had to cut Okay, I think it's 12.5 billion. Okay, so 4 times 12.5 billion would make up the $50 billion recessionary gap that we were in. Okay, and always be ready. This is one of those questions that you may have to explain on an FRQ of why the taxing multiplier is less than the spending multiplier. Remember that when the government decides to spend money by building new planes or building new roads or whatever they're spending money to build or whoever they're paying, that initial spending gets added to GDP and helps make up the gap. However, if they cut taxes by $50 billion, that tax cut, that initial amount of money that people aren't giving the government, that initial money is not, added to GDP. So only kind of like the second round of tax cutting starts. Okay, so that's why your tax multiplier is always going to be less than your spending multiplier. Okay, and finally, from this activity, we should know that short-term fiscal policy is more effective when people spend their money. If they save their money, it doesn't get multiplied. Okay, hopefully this makes sense to you, and hopefully you're doing well, guys.